Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. One of the things about being a podcaster is that I've been spending a lot of time on research and trying to find guests to have these conversations with. And one of the byproducts of that research is I'm reading a lot of yoga books. And it's fascinating to me that there's just so much out there. And it's been a wonderful journey just going through all this research. And my friend Indu Arora, who has been on this podcast before talking about Yoga Nidra, that I've heard so many of you write to me and share your own experience of how much you enjoyed her interview and our conversation about Yoga Nidra. She just released her third book. It's called SOMA 100 Heritage Recipes for Self Care. And if you know me, and honestly, even if you don't, I love self-care, DIY recipes. It takes me right back to my childhood. My mother used to teach me some of these home remedies and these skincare masks and these small things that we could do every day just to look after ourselves. So I was really excited when Indu's book came out, and I knew we had to have a conversation about it. It's been a difficult year for everybody, and self-care is very, very significant at this time. And the self-care recipes and rituals that Indu shares in this book is unlike modern day Instagrammy self-care, where you need to buy something from someone else to give yourself this care. Ayurveda, or rather in Ayurveda, the self-care starts from within. You move from internal to external. So it's really accessible. It's small changes you can make in your everyday life. And there's just so much Indu packs into this simple but really powerful and rich book called Soma. So when we sat down, we really got into a conversation about some rituals and recipes and practices that one can do. And there's a moment in the interview where Indu briefly talks about doshas, or she brings it up. And I'm doing another episode with an Ayurvedic doctor soon where we'll go into in-depth conversations about what are doshas and how do you know what your dosha is. So just so you know that. Side note, that's coming up in another interview really soon. Indu's book is actually an ebook, and you can get it at the click of a button. It makes a really good holiday gift. I'm actually planning to give this to some of my friends who I know enjoy self-care rituals. And I asked Indu, why not a hard copy? Because it would just be so luxurious to sit and flip through it, right? And she explained that during this pandemic, she wanted this information, this knowledge to reach the listeners and the readers right away. And getting a physical book with international shipping and just everything being slow, she wanted to get this out as soon as possible. So that's why it's an ebook. And I really appreciate that sentiment and helping us look after ourselves. So I hope you enjoyed this interview. There's so much that we didn't get to, but there's also a lot that we covered. And Indu's book is a must read if you are like me and obsessed with self-care, Ayurveda, yoga, and DIY stuff. Okay. Before I let you get to the episode, I want to please remind you to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts just to show your support for the show. It really helps us to continue to do what we do on a weekly basis. And if you do, I really appreciate it. Okay. It only takes less than a minute to leave us a little rating and review. And now let's talk about self-care. Hi, my name is Arundhati, and you're listening to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. I'm an ex-Bollywood dancer turned yoga and wellness educator. I've built a 6-figure business as an immigrant, woman of color yoga teacher with no business background, no handstands, pure instinct, and the free information found on Google. If you love doing yoga and you dream of teaching it someday, this podcast is for you. We go over everything from doing and teaching yoga to scaling a small business, living a modern yoga lifestyle, and so much more. You'll find interesting, fun, raw conversations along with some tips, tricks, strategies, and insights in this podcast. So grab your cup of chai and let's jump in. Hi, Indu. Welcome back to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast.
Namaste, Arundhati, and all the listeners. It's a pleasure to be back.
You know, you are our first guest a repeat guest, and it's really exciting to have you back. Your last interview with us for Yoga Nidra was really well received. I got so many listener feedback from everyone saying they listened to it twice. So thank you for coming back.
It is humbling that you share that, and so much love from my heart to all the listeners who heard it twice and they found value in it. It's all about sharing.
So, the reason we're speaking today is you just released a book about Ayurvedic self care called SOMA. Can you tell the listeners what this book is and what SOMA means?
Soma is a journey through my childhood. And those formative years where I received mothering from my grandmother, from my mother, from my father, and through my teenage years through my gurus of yoga and Ayurveda. So, all their words of wisdom, their practical wisdom, their philosophical wisdom, those recipes, remedies, and practices. As a child, I used to write them down. I used to have a different kind of journal per se. I was very curious when I used to hear
Uh huh.
my grandmother saying that take this black pepper for this, or my guru saying apply chickpea flour with yogurt or something on this acne or for your hair. So all these things used to excite me. And I used to write these things down. So I feel that when you have something like this, when you receive something like this, and you have an inbuilt curiosity towards it, it's a responsibility to share. So Soma is a gift from my ancestral lineage and from my guru lineage to all the readers who may benefit from it and may pass it on, so that this this wisdom can live on forever.
hmm I'm so glad you brought up that it's from your childhood. One of my earliest memories of just self care is when my mother used to teach me these face packs and skincare hacks, and we used to try all these things at home, like these home remedies. So, your book took me back to my childhood as well. And I told you this before we started recording. I'm obsessed with self care. And the fact that you wrote this book, I was like a kid in a candy store reading it. So, I want to talk about self care a little more. Do you think in today's world we have misunderstood self care? Because as a yoga teacher, I often hear, and I'm sure you do too, that people say, oh, I just don't have time to do this. I don't have time to indulge in this practice. What do you think is at stake if we don't look after ourselves?
Arundhati, everything is at stake if we don't take care of ourselves. We can only give others what we have. We cannot we cannot fuel others from an empty tank. This is really important, my dear listeners, to recognize that the first chapter in Ayurvedic texts is always about prevention and self-care. And the first word in the yogic text, Patanjali Yoga Sutra, the first tenet is ahimsa, which means kindness. In a way, it means kindness towards self. So, this is the foundation of anything that we would like to do, be it for ourselves, achieving our goals, or doing something for our loved ones, our community, our nation, Mother Nature, climate. If we want to be productive, we need to make sure that we are in harmony with our physical body, our mental body, and emotional body. And I agree with you when you mentioned that self care has been to some extent misunderstood. It is not just a spa day, it is not just a few days vacation, it is not just once in a year just taking some time off and going off the grid. It is important that we understand self care is a primordial call that needs to be heard every single day. You cannot have a self care debt and then one day you find some time and just pay it off. No, it weighs upon your body, upon your mind, upon your emotions from day to day. So self care is not something that you get from outside. Self care is not something that you can necessarily purchase from outside. It's an attitude, how we live our life, knowing that we extract so much out of our bodies and we ask so much out of our emotions. How do we give back?
I I'm just nodding here because I agree so much with what you're saying, and I love that you said self-care is an attitude. I'm going to be repeating that to myself and to a lot of other people I talk to. So let's jump into the book a little more. Your book goes through a variety of self-care rituals, but I'd like to start with a routine. Do you think it's important for everyone to have a self-care routine, and where does this start? Does this start with a morning routine?
We have something which is intrinsic in us, and that is called circadian rhythm. That rhythm which constantly our body is trying to align with the macrocosmic rhythm of sun and moon, of day and night. And this is the foundation. When I mentioned that the first chapter in Ayurvedic texts is of prevention, it is really based on dinacharya and ratricharya. So for those who may not be aware of this term, dinacharya means, dina means sun or solar or day, and acharya means something that you follow, a routine that you follow. And ratri charya means, ratri, if simply translated, means night, but it's such a beautiful word, Arundhati. Ra means to give, to nurture, and Tra means to protect. So night has this natural giving, loving, nurturing, nourishing, motherly presence. But the acharya is the routine that you follow. And it's really important that we constantly calibrate our internal sun and our internal moon to the external sun and external moon. And for that, there are some really basic practices. They're not time consuming, they are just reminders. I think at some deep internal level, we are aware of it. But because of everything else we are surrounded with, because of everything that happens on a day to day basis, we forget to almost analyze and recalibrate and remember and prioritize what is important. That if we are not aligned with this rhythm in a healthy way, everything is going to suffer. So you are right, the practices in the book start with tuning with to the circadian rhythm, how to have a healthy solar routine so that when you are awake with awareness, so that everything that happens throughout the day, those emotional ups and downs, those physical challenges of the work we may be involved in that really weighs heavy on our body, that puts a pressure on us, how do we find a place that is an healthy anchor point? How do we start the day in a way so that we can always come back to that as our solid foundation, and not uh, react to situations, instead respond to them? And the same is for the night routine.
So powerful.
How can we sleep with awareness? So I what I'm trying to say is awareness is the key here. If we are going to just start our day with an alarm clock, with a pressing to do list, with panic, with heaviness, with just because I have to get up, this is the feeling, this is a sentiment that's going to guide the rest of the day. So, how do we wake up with awareness?
So true. And I think most people wake up with that panic and those alarm clocks and jump out of bed and just rush, unintentionally but mindlessly in the morning. That's why I think it's so important to pause and explore this. We won't be able to go into all the morning rituals that you have listed in your book, but I'd love to know Do you have a favorite morning ritual?
I do, and it is something that is a gift from my grandmother. In India, it used to be joint families, and my grandmother used to, well, we used to live with our grandmother. This is how I would like to put it. We used to live with our grandmother. And early morning, at times, I used to be with her, and I used to see that around 4:30 in the morning, she would wake up and put this comforter on her head and sit like a pyramid. And I used to always wonder, what is she doing? She was a devotee of Krishna, and she would murmur this, mantra, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. But basically, that was her thread to awareness. And this, I later realized there is a practice called Atma Tattva Avlokanam, which means waking up with with the being a witness to your consciousness. And that best way to connect to your consciousness, that ever present, constant companion, is our breath. So can we wake up with the awareness of our breath? This breath is called swara, swara. And swara means the one we are married to, the one we have an everlasting relationship with. This is our everlasting companion. From the first breath we take to the last breath we will ever take, breath is ever present. Are we present to it? Can we iron out the creases and the folds and the rough edges of our breath upon waking up and make sure that we look at it with tenderness, with love, with just the presence of mind? So this Atma Tattva Valokanam and presence and awareness of the swara, we talked about the circadian rhythm. And this is a practice I want the listeners to do right now. Place your index finger right in front of your nostril, of your dominant hand. And right under the nostril, you will feel the touch of the flow of breath. And through one nostril, you will feel a little bit more dominant flow of your exhalation. Now, that swara, that particular nostril, that particular rhythm is more active in your body right now. What does it mean? The right and the left nostril, through yogic lens, through tantric lens, symbolize sun and the moon. The right nostril symbolizes the solar current, and the left symbolizes the lunar current. And every 60 to 90 minutes, it changes from right to left. So, this nasal region is like our constant thermostat. And when we wake up in the morning, there is one particular current or energy that is excessive in the body. So when I suggest you to place your index finger under the nostril and feel the dominant flow, where do you feel, from which nostril do you feel the flow of your exhalation? Right when you wake up. Right when you wake up in the morning and you feel that that flow is through the right nostril. Just hypothetically, close the right nostril and breathe a few times through the left nostril. Either this or step down from your bed through the right foot. So when you do that, you allow the diffusion of that excess charge of that solar or lunar charge that you wake up with. So you are starting with the right foot. You're starting your day in the right way by balancing this thermostat, by balancing this solar lunar energy and aligning with the cosmic rhythms. This is my favorite practice to connect with the substance of consciousness in the space of the heart and connect with the breath and align it.
Wonderful. It's something I've been trying to do. I read it only like 2 days ago, but it's something that I'm now, as soon as I wake up, I'm like, which is my dominant nostril? And I'm trying to practice this. And I really enjoy this Swara Yoga practice. So let's go to the end of the day right here. Is there any special or favorite nighttime recommendation that you have, or a practice that you enjoy a lot?
There are so many practices that are coming to my mind, Arundhati, when you ask this, because this is the beauty of Ayurveda. the gift of abundance. It just gives you so many choices. Like how would what is out of harmony in the evening time? Is it your mind that is stressed? Is it your body that is feeling tired? Is it your digestive system that needs a little bit support? Is it your legs that are achy? What is going on? And you can pick a ritual accordingly, and these rituals are there for you in Soma, and these are passed on to me from at various stages of my life. Now, is there one thing which is my favorite? It's very difficult, but is there one thing which is nostalgic? Yes. I,
Okay.
I don't know if there is one favorite, because I really like to listen to what my body is asking that particular day, and then I tune up the volume of that particular ritual. And it could be anything from going to bed in a conscious way, following guided relaxation, whether it's self guided or listening to a recording, or it is applying oil on the foot soles. So there are many, but there is one that directly takes me to my childhood. And that is, it's a different time right now. We don't see, and I'm not talking about this pandemic time that we are in, but even prior to it, we hardly see kids playing outside in dirt. And the place where I come from in childhood, oh my God, we used to love dirt. There was no distance between, there was no separation between us and the ground. And we used to play, and you might remember it or know this term. We used to play Coco and Kabaddi. And listeners,
Oh,
if you
yes.
don't know this, you must Google it, okay? And I talk about it in the book also. So we used to play Coco and Kabaddi. And if you're playing these games, oh my God, you are filled with dirt, your clothes are stained, and you come back home with
Absolutely.
dirt on your face and hairs all ruffled. So when we used to come back home, and my mother used to see us like this, she would immediately suggest us to do what I later learned on. Terminologies come later. The way these teachings have been passed in the family, it is so natural. And then later on, when you become curious, you learn that, oh, this is what it's called. So this practice is called pancha snana. And pancha means five, and snana means bathing. So pancha snana is such a simple practice of bathing five parts of the body. So washing the feet, washing the 2 feet, washing the two hands, and washing the face. And merely by doing this, and I suggest you listeners to try this. If you're coming back home, or if you're home, because these days we are home, and you feel you're just this, you need a refresh, you need a reboot, you need to feel ready for this night and ready to tune down. Just try this. Wash your feet in the winters, wash your feet with warm water, wash your hands, and wash your face. And what that does is, these areas are rich in nerve endings. And so, what happens is, throughout the day, whatever happens to us, whatever emotions and stressors we go through, we curl the toes, we clench the jaw, we hold the fingers tight. We don't even realize we do that. And our face goes through so many emotions throughout the day. And these muscles, these fine capillaries get tired. So, when you wash your face and rinse your hands and rinse your feet, it's almost like erasing those impressions of the stress. It's like giving it a chance to bring up this freshness. So this is a nostalgic practice for me. In the childhood, it was more about really washing dust, and I really see it as hygiene practice. And this time has taught us the value of hygiene, a good hygiene, and how basic it is, and how distant and advanced it can seem when we kind of step away from these daily practices. They can become like a thing to do, versus they are so natural. So this is nostalgic for me as an evening practice, and it brings back the memories of childhood, and it brings back those layers of education that later on you learn intellectually why it is important, and then you learn experientially that yes, it works.
Hmm. Hmm. I used to do this myself. I remember my grandmother always saying when we walked in, like, go wash your hands, your feet, and your face. I never knew why, but it's only after I read about your Pancha Snana that it made full sense. And I'm like, that's why we do it. So thank you for that. I want to go back to something you just mentioned a while ago. You spoke about putting oil on the soles of the feet at night. Can you tell me the significance of why we do this? And is there a particular oil? Is it dosha dependent?
So, something interesting. Think of it, even though it's a podcast, think of it, when you open a book and there is a note at the bottom, think of what I'm going to say as that. The word for oil in Sanskrit is telam, telam. And that word comes from til, Til, til. And til means sesame. So, the original oil from the Sanskrit text, from the Ayurvedic text, if there is one oil that the texts have been pointing towards, out of which the word oil itself is derived, tela itself is derived, it is tila, sesame oil. This is a tridoshik oil. Those of the listeners who are familiar with the term dosha and tridosha, it is a tridoshik oil, so which means it is good for vata, pitta, kapha, for all the doshas. And those of you who do not know the term dosha, become curious about it, because it is exciting to stay in touch with your body, with your unique constitution, and then choose your practices, be it asanas or pranayam or diet, accordingly. And those who are aware of this term, just know sesame oil is the most powerful, beneficial, unctuous, nourishing, loving, balancing oil. And you know applying on the foot soles, we this is something that my teacher shared with me, Arundhati, and I'm just doing the job of passing it on, that we are one of the only species that is vertical. And when we are vertical, all the tension goes on the foot soles, on the feet. The feet bear the weight of our body throughout the day. And it is the feet that also hold the tension, that hold that stress. And when we apply oil, the application of oil on the foot sole, that act in Ayurveda is called snehan. And sneha means love, an act of self love, an act of giving back. And the unctuousness of the oil is like the touch of the mother or anyone who mothered you. So when we give that loving touch to our foot soles, that snehan, and apply a balancing oil like cold pressed sesame oil, and just lather the foot soles with it, it is so healing. And what it does is the 7 layers of the skin are directly associated with nourishing the 7 tissues. So when you apply oil on the foot soles, first of all, the nerve endings carry that message of love and unctuousness and care to the entire body. Point number one. And when you apply it on the skin, that oil which is warming, and this is important. Why sesame oil is considered tridoshik? Because it is naturally warming. Otherwise, if we choose any other oil, that has to first depend upon the digestive capacity of our skin to absorb it, which means if our skin's health is not optimum, then the skin does not absorb what you apply. And this is something I'm sure the listeners might have experienced when you apply some oil, some heavy fat, or at times some lotion on the skin. Then what happens is that at times it gives birth to acne or rashes. And one of the reasons, not the only reason, and one of the reasons is that our skin's pitta, our skin's agni is not optimum. So it's not able to digest that oil. But sesame oil,
Got it.
because it has this internal heat, has this natural warming, it does not takes away the energy from the body to digest it. It comes with that energy. So when you apply that warming sesame oil for a few minutes, just rub back and forth. And here I would suggest, if you don't know about this tool, Marma Stick, just look it up on my website, and I'm sure Arundhati will remind us where you can find that. It's a tool called Marma Stick, and you rub that stick on your foot soles. What it does is it allows the 7 layers of the skin to absorb the oil and nourish the 7 tissues. So it's a very simple act. If you don't have time to apply oil on your whole body, this is one place you can apply and be sure that the effect of it are felt on the entire body.
Wonderful. I'll absolutely link everything that you mention in the show notes, and those can be found on the website. I have a silly question, a follow up question to that. In my pantry right now, I have toasted sesame oil. That will not work, correct?
I'm glad
I
you
had to
asked.
ask.
Yes, yes, that is for cooking. If you want to smell like food, please go ahead. But that's why I mentioned cold pressed sesame oil. Please make sure you don't use the toasted sesame oil. If you have a furry, 4 4 foot dog, at home,
I
might
do.
come and lick your feet. So no, that is just culinary sesame oil.
I thought so.
This is
Okay.
cold pressed, it is that which is applied on the skin.
Yeah, I was just excited and I was like, "Oh, I can try it tonight." Well, I need to wait and go buy the correct one. Okay, so let's come to the skincare section in your book. And I've said this maybe thrice already, but I'm obsessed with DIY skincare and home remedies. It's one of my most favorite memories from childhood, whipping up those things with my mother. So, since the skin is the largest organ, there are two things I want to ask you about that I did not directly relate to skincare. So I was fascinated by it. One is oil pulling, and the other one is tongue scraping. So, can we talk a little bit about what is oil pulling, its benefits, and how does one practice this? I've never tried it. I have heard it, but I've never tried it.
See, first of all, it makes my heart so happy, Arundhati, as we are having this conversation. And this conversation takes you to your childhood and reminds you of those interactions with your mother, with your grandmother. And this is exactly what brings me so much happiness, that 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 reminders to stay connected to our roots, and those connections, like how you mentioned that now I understand that this is Panchasnana. And this is one of my passions, to connect the dots so that these things that we learn without logic and reason at that time, they are not lost in the crease of time. So it just know that it makes my heart so happy that you're mentioning this. And if any of the listeners, it reminds you of some rituals that you used to do with anyone who has mothered you, and you're going back to that lane, just know that my heart is so happy. And if it's connecting any dot for you, that's just for me, it is just that is success, that brings happiness to my heart. Now, coming back to your question, so there is a specific section in the book which is about care for the senses, the five sensory organs. And in the basic definition of health in Ayurvedic text, it doesn't just talk about the body and the doshas. It specifically talks about the five sensory organs: eyes, nose, ears, tongue, and skin. And the nature of these organs is they constantly receive this feedback. They constantly are extroverted, which means they're constantly engaged with the external stimuli. And this is the lens with which we see the world, Arundhati. And what if, I'm just giving a scenario, what if the glasses, if you wear glasses, if you wear prescription glasses or sunglasses, what if that has water drops marks on it, or finger, the stain of the fingerprints on it?
Can't see clearly.
How would you like to see, through that lens? Wouldn't that be bothersome? Wouldn't that be
Absolutely.
irritating? Wouldn't that distort the picture? This is with these senses, with eyes, ears, nostrils, tongue, and our skin. We are constantly receiving information from outside. But what are we doing on an everyday basis to clean that lens so that we see from the fresh eyes? So that we hear from the fresh ears, so that we taste something and totally relish it. So let me talk first about tongue scraping. It is, it can be a remedy, but really it is more about oral hygiene. Just like we brush our teeth, and we know we don't need to explain. I hope, but that we don't need to explain why brushing of the teeth is important. That it is a part of basic oral hygiene, and mouth is the place where there is maximum number of bacteria, and and it is also the place where we experience the taste. through our taste buds. Now, tongue scraping is a basic oral cleansing. And let me tie it in with oil pulling, which is there are now, this is not a podcast on oil pulling, but know that it could be because there is so much about oil pulling and there is so much variety of oil pulling. And it's not just oil pulling, there are different concoctions that are used, there are different herbal concoctions that are used. And one of the concoctions is oil based or fat based. And there are various ways to do oil pulling, and one of it is kavala, in which you fill your mouth, like really fill your mouth uncomfortably with a concoction, be it a herbal, tea or with oil, and you hold it in your mouth for a minute or two till the consistency of the concoction changes. So if it is oil, it may become frothy or thicker or more liquid, and then you spit it out. And the oil pulling that you're talking about, that's called gandusha. And in that practice, what we do is generally, again, sesame oil is taken. And this is something I would like to reiterate to the listeners of this podcast, that at times, Ayurveda, these recipes become social media recipes. We get social media information. We rely on social media knowledge. I would suggest you to be aware of that. It's really important that we understand the root and not just start following something because it's becoming a trend. Oil pulling is not associated with coconut oil. Coconut oil is cooling in nature and sweet in nature. And the reason we do oil pulling is one, to cleanse that excess mucus in the mouth, and two, because of the warming nature of the sesame oil and because of the content of the sesame oil, the vitamin E and the natural calcium, high calcium in the sesame oil, that's really healthy for your teeth and your gums. So when you take sesame oil in the mouth and you swirl it in the mouth and you keep swirling it, what it does, it's such a wonderful exercise for your jaw. And we know we clench the jaw, we hold the tension in the jaw, and it's such a good toning for the gums. So it really makes the gums stronger. And it is such a good food for the teeth with the calcium. But more than that, because of the viscosity of the sesame oil, it really cleanses, it creates this vacuum and it really pulls out the toxins from the food pipe, that which is difficult to cleanse. Not just that, it is such a beautiful massage to the fine cheek capillaries. So I even call it the yogis, the yogis glow, that behold the beauty, that hold this oil in your mouth, and it will bring this, because of this massage to the cheek capillaries, it really brings that glow on the face. And so if you're doing the cleanse, and if you have not done oil pulling before, one, choose sesame oil. Two, do it empty stomach. Three, if you have to think of where should you place it, like if I'm brushing my teeth, should I do it before or after? Remember, cleanse from inside out. So first oil pulling, then scraping the tongue, and then brushing the teeth. So cleanse from inside out. And do no, we don't need to do it for 20 minutes. That's again social media knowledge. It's not done for 20 minutes. It is done as per capacity. So listen to your body, and if you start feeling fatigue in your jaw, in the back of the neck, in the throat, that is a time to spit the oil out. Or if you experience that there is moisture in the nostril, moisture in the eyes, and the viscosity of the oil has changed, it has become more frothy, thicker, or more liquid, it's time to spit it out. And then rinse your mouth with warm water so that that film of oil that is in the mouth is cleansed. And for the tongue scraping, it is not just now, tongue scraping has also become very common information, which I'm very happy to, it brings happiness to me that these things are reviving. But when they are reviving with half knowledge, that is dangerous.
Absolutely.
Tongue scraping needs to be done with a tongue scraper, not from the back of your toothbrush or from the bristles of the toothbrush or using the spoon.
Oh gosh.
And I'm saying it because I've heard these examples.
I've seen some of them online myself, to be honest.
Yes, and it is not something that you share. That one tongue scraper is not for the entire family, just like one toothbrush, I hope so, is not for the entire family. So it is something that you must have your own, and everyone should have both a copper and a steel tongue scraper. And
What's the difference, Indu, between copper and steel?
the difference is in the metallic ions, how they interact with our salivary amylase, our salivary enzyme, and how they interact with our the mucus in our mouth and on our tongue. So there are different kind of metabolic toxins, right? So once we ingest the food, the gut and the gut enzymes, they do the job, and whatever the body is not able to process and is not nourishing is out of the body as defecation, urination, and sweat. And I know this sounds, like, oh my God, she's going there, but you know what? Ayurvedic wisdom, it talks about everything, and this is important.
Absolutely.
So whatever is not nourishing to the body is out of the body in the form of defecation, urination, and sweat. But those microtoxins which cannot be metabolized any further, the body's innate wisdom, what it does is in the night time, it pulls it up through the food pipe and brings it on the tongue. It's almost the body saying that, hey, I can just bring it out up till here. Now from here, it's your job to scrape it out. So if you see yellowish or whitish built up, which is more a sign of kapha, that sticky, frothy kind of metabolic waste or built up, use copper because of its warming effect, because of its antibacterial effect, because of its anti-inflammatory effect. It really is the best metal to cleanse the tongue. But if you see cracks on the tongue or red patches, then use the steel tongue scraper. So don't the see Ayurveda and yoga both are about living mindfully and living with awareness. None of it should become so robotic that you stop paying attention to your body.
Absolutely. Hmm.
So look at your stick your tongue out in the morning after oil pulling if you're going to do oil pulling, and look at your tongue and see what is it saying. And if you have curiosity, like a question comes to your mind, what's the difference between cracks or teeth marks or whitish built up or yellowish built up, you are at the right place. I cannot answer everything right now, but there is wisdom behind it. There are different regions on the tongue associated with different taste and different internal organs, and it is for you to explore, become curious and learn about your body.
Isn't that in your book? The tongue, the picture of the tongue with the.
Yes, you will. Yes, absolutely. So there are many things that are in this easy, easy, hopefully easy to read, easy to glide through book. But there is I try, I've tried not to compromise on what is important to be shared. So it's there, absolutely.
Okay. And I remember seeing the picture and it was fascinating for me. And I was really glad that you put the picture of the tongue and the tastes and all of that in, and I'll probably try to put the page number in the show notes for people who do buy the book. So one more question here. You mentioned this at the start of your explanation about oil pulling and tongue scraping. And thank you for sharing that. I didn't know you had different type of tongue scrapers and so much more detail that I'm missing. Two things I want to go back to. One is not a question. I'm just agreeing with you that social media information can be more dangerous, and we have to be really careful as to what we take from social media. And Instagram is not the source of wisdom. It's just, it could be inspiration. It could spark an idea, but that's not where you learn from. So I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's really important to remind everyone. And the second thing I want to go back to is you spoke about healthy years. And I know Ayurvedic self care looks at the senses. You've said that too. What can we do about keeping our ears healthy? Nobody who does modern day self care thinks of ears and our ability to hear well. Anything that you want to say here, Indu?
There is a practice, Arundhati, and it is called mauna. And mauna means the act of conscious silence. We are constantly bombarded with all kinds of sound. Even if you switch off your, I'm going to use such a retro word, music system,
I mean, I understand it. I'm pretty retro too.
Listen, listeners, I'm not in my 70s, I'm 43, but I have this vocabulary from India. I cannot get rid of it. But
Oh, absolutely. I understand music system really well.
so even if you switch off the source where you're listening the sound from your music or podcast or anything, there is still so many sounds we cannot get rid of, and they are a part of environmental sound pollution, traffic pollution, construction. There is just so many things going on, and the ears are constantly engaged. And even if, let's say, we switch off everything, there is this self talk, and a lot of time it's negative self talk, and this is harmful. It's not just the external ears, although the external ears are constantly engaged in listening. There is, whether it is active listening or it is passive listening, there is always listening. So read about this. I write about it in the book as one of the recipe. This is not just a book of recipes which you take to kitchen and you have to cook something. It is a book of practices, remedies, recipes, those words of wisdom that have guided my life so far and shall continue to guide the rest of my life. These are conversations with my father, with my guru, and one of the practices that was given to me by my teacher is Mauna. And some of you might know, and Arundhati, I know you are aware, I've written this book on mudra called Mudra, the Sacred Secret. And when I wrote this book, I went to India and stayed in my guru's ashram and took the Mauna for 1 month. And in that Mauna, I wrote this book in 1 month time. In that time of Mauna, when you take Mauna, when you are in that period of conscious silence, you can really pull back your scattered mind, and you can really hone into your creativity, and you can really reboot your system. And more than anything, Mauna is so, there is something called Indriya Mauna, which means Mauna of the sensory organs. And that is what I'm suggesting you. I'm not telling you put this in your ear and massage your ears, although I can suggest that too. But I feel the need of the hour is sometimes we need to switch off. And we need to do that consciously, not in a way where we pass out, not in a way where the body shouts, not in a way when the ears start ringing or hurting or aching, not when it shouts for attention. Can we be more responsible? We call ourselves human beings with this brain, this intellect. However, this intellect, I would say that let's start using common sense. Can we give some break to our body? Can we give it that self care? Can we listen to it? Can we pay attention to it? These recipes can bring that insight to you, but more than anything, it will still has to come from being self motivated and self realization. So we really need to start paying attention, Arundhati, before it's too late, before we have to resort to medicines and treatments.
Yeah, before it becomes a bigger issue in our lives. So I've practiced Mauna before, not very intensely. I learned it from my teacher in India, and initially Mauna was really hard for me, but now I've noticed Mauna has become a natural part of my day where it's just silence in any way possible. Sometimes it's talking, sometimes it's not actively listening. I actually enjoy Mauna a lot. There's no question here. I just wanted to share that I enjoy the practice myself. It it's very peaceful for people who actually get to practice Mauna. And it's not as complicated as most people think it is. So so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and you can start it in a very simple, digestible, bite-sized way. How about introduce this practice of conscious silence once in 15 days for just 4 hours, not the entire day. How about just 4 hours? And how about take the silence where you're not verbally communicating, so take step by step, because Mauna has so many layers. But start from where you are, and no matter where you start from, whether it's 1 hour or whether it's just avoiding a verbal communication or avoiding the screen time or listening or watching or writing, this is all different kinds of Mauna. It will still benefit you. And these practices are there for you. They are there for us to support us to live a life of clarity, health, wholesomeness, so that we can be productive, so that we can live a life of dharma, so that we can live a life of purpose.
Hmm. And feel fulfilled at the end of every day. Yeah. So I want to, because we've been talking about the senses. What about our eyes? I want to finish the senses and then go to the mudra and the mantra part of your book. Anything for our eyes, especially nowadays, right? Everybody is on Zoom. We're more in front of our screens than ever before. Is there any favorite self-care ritual for tired, burning eyes?
Yes, there is. And again, you will find it in SOMA, this 100 heritage recipes for self-care. There is a special section for it. Is there something specifically coming to my mind? There are a couple of things coming to my mind. One is the ghee soaked cotton pads, you know.
I was hoping you would say that because that's the one I want to talk about.
Yeah, so take these round cotton pads and apply ghee clarified butter on it, just like you would apply butter on the toast. Just apply it. Or if the oil is melted, then you can just pour a little bit of oil on it, clarified butter on it, and lay down and close your eyes and upkeep those ghee soaked eye pads on the eyes for 5 minutes. And that cooling, nourishing, unctuous, relaxing quality of the clarified butter ghee is so loving to the eyes, so healing, and so calming. And it's like a soothing balm to those dry, red, achy, tired eyes. And once after 5 minutes, just wipe off the eyes and know that it's absolutely natural. If when you open your eyes, it may be a little bit blurred, and even if a drop of ghee goes into your eyes, it's not going to harm you. It's not going to sting or burn, because ghee is sweet in taste, so it's not going to create this burning sensation, and it's not harmful. In fact, there is a complete practice in Ayurveda called netra tarpan, where eyes open, the eyes are bathed in ghee. So it's not going to harm you, but think of it as a mini version that we can do on an everyday basis, especially those who are working on the screen. And these days, where everything is on Zoom or everything is through screen, all communication is through screen, whether it's iPhone, iPad, any other kind of smartphone, or any kind of computer device. We are constantly in front of a screen, and the eyes do get tired. So this is a really, really simple remedy. But another thing that is coming to my mind, Arundhati, is, if this seems a little bit like, I don't want to put ghee over my eyes, because there could be, if it is new for you, it can feel it, the mind can be a little bit, kind of reserved about it. Then a simple practice, and you will find, this is a practice which is called apana kriyas, and you'll find it in my book, Yoga Ancient Heritage, Tomorrow's Vision. These are really simple eye exercises. Do them several times a day. Put a reminder on your phone every 4 hours. Blink your eyes and really lubricate the eyes and release that tension from the eye muscles. And it's really important, and I cannot share all these practices right now. You might need to refer the book, but there is a value in exercising. We exercise our body, exercise our limbs, exercise our core, exercise our spine, but we don't exercise the eyes. At times, in fact, we are looking at the screen, we forget blinking.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm actually very excited to try this. I love ghee. I like eating it. I like rubbing it all over me. So I just needed another excuse to drown myself in some ghee. Okay, so I want to actually go to a very special part of the book. And I know it's not possible for us to really dive deep because there's so much richness in that. But I want to talk about mudras. And there's a big section of different mudras in your book, for right from, if you're tired, for heart health, for if you feel cold. I mean, the list is endless. Can you tell the listeners what is a mudra and why it's a part of self care?
Hmm. You know, Arundhati, you might have another repeat guest. And I think it's like sowing the seeds for another podcast because mudra is such a deep topic.
I know, and you are always welcome back, and we can do a full episode on mudras. But I want to highlight just how much richness there is in this self care book in Soma. So, just very briefly, I know there's so much you can share, but just for someone who's never heard of mudras.
So, yes, that was a conscious decision to add mudras to self care. Mudras, the word is so beautiful. Its root is mud, and mud means delight. Mud means a state of happiness, joy, bliss, delight. And mudra means to draw forth that state from within outside. It's something that we do, that we can do, but eventually something that we become. So a practice that we become, a practice that is also its consequence. It these hand gestures, and in the book I'm talking about hand gestures, but there are so many different kinds of mudras, mudras of eyes, of neck, of body, of feet, of hands, but the most common ones are of the hand. The way these hand gestures work is it every hand gesture that we do consciously and hold it for a minimum of 2 minutes leaves a very unique signature on the breath. So think of a mudra as a unique signature on the breath. And when that breath is impressed, because mudra also means seal, the word mudra means seal. So it leaves an impression. When it leaves that seal of that signature, a very specific signature on the breath, that breath then informs the biorhythm. That breath then informs the physiology of the body. That breath then works on the emotions. So mudras are states of mind expressed through the body. It is not just a one way lane.
Beautiful.
So when now these realized beings, these disembodied saints who left this wisdom for us, they 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 reached that mudra. That mudra was the consequence of what the states of consciousness and mind they were experiencing. But we as learners, as enthusiasts, as seekers, we can copy. We can we know copy for a good reason. We can copy that mudra and hold that mudra, and it starts creating this domino effect through that loop. Mudra also means a loop. So it starts creating this effect from cell to cell, from cell to tissue, from tissue to organ, from organ to organ system, and organ system to the organism. So it slowly brings that effect of that mud, that delight, and brings us closer to our essential nature, that ananda, that it brings us closer to ourselves. And all these things that you see in the book, there are, I think, at least about 10 or 15 mudras among these 50, among the 100 recipes, there are 10 or 15. And you will see that there are, as you mentioned, that popping and cracking of joints, or pains and aches, or headache, or difficulty in falling asleep, or changing of the energy, the energy levels. So there are mudras. These things become a hiccup when we experience these things. It kind of distances us from ourselves. We cannot be in touch with our inner self, with that state of ananda, if we are experiencing this discomfort. So when we practice a mudra associated with that, it kind of releases that impression and creates that chain of communication and rewires us to our innermost self, our deepermost self. So these are states of mind expressed through the body.
Through the body. That's beautifully explained. And I'm sure I'm going to go back to this recording and listen to that explanation again. But just a follow up question. And I know we can't explore the mudras, but can people do this several times during the day? I would assume yes.
Mm. So again, I'm going to bring a retro example. And listeners, do you remember a top? Arundhati, do you know what a top is that you spin, that you hold from the?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
The spinning top. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so if you have,
I don't know if a lot of listeners will know
well,
though.
okay, this is like this wooden thing that used to be there, and now plastic also with this kind of pointing thing on the top, and you spin it, and you spin it on a surface, and it spins, and it continues to spin. But if you have to make sure that it continues spinning before it loses its rhythm, you have to spin it again. You
Ah,
get the you
understood.
get the you get the visual what I'm saying.
Hmm.
Now this is directly connected with the frequency, the question that you're asking. Every practice starts a specific rhythm in the body, which means its effect stays for a specific time. Before that effect starts to fade, we need to do it again. So a
Got it.
mudra's effect lasts for 4 to 6 hours. The rhythm it induces stays for 4 to 6 hours, which means every 4 to 6 hours. If you're doing a mudra, let me clarify this. If you're doing a mudra for a specific therapeutic result, if you're doing a mudra as a complementary tool, as a alternative tool, as a support, no, as a supportive tool in case of arthritis, insomnia, asthma. If you're doing it, then for a specific therapeutic result, we must do the mudras 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. Have the dose of mudra in the morning, afternoon, and evening for 2 minutes with one hand or both hands, palms
Got it.
facing up. But if you're doing a mudra in meditation for supporting meditation, which is called the adhyatmic mudras or the spiritual mudras, then you don't need to do it 3 times a day. Then the time, the duration, the frequency are not barriers. These are not things that we have to keep in mind. Hold it, in that case, to your pleasantness.
Got it. Thank you. That was really helpful to clarify. And there are many mudras in your book. I actually have not personally done a lot of mudras, so I'm really excited to start digging into some of them in practice. Now, Indu, at this point, right, I feel like you and I don't know about you, but I could talk to you about your book for the next 2 hours. I have still so much that I haven't touched, the poses that you've put in there, the mantras, and there's just such a wealth of knowledge. Firstly, I want to thank you for sharing the book with all of us and also being generous and sharing all of this on the podcast. It really is something that people need, and this book couldn't have come out at a better time. So, thank you. I'm glad you came on the podcast. Anything you want to share before we wrap things up for today?
Well, thank you for having me, Arundhati. And I really wished, I really pray that we as individuals, we as community, as society, as humanity, understand and not underscore the value of self care, true self care, that which is moment to moment awareness, that which is present in how you wake up and how you go to bed, that which is present in how you speak and when to know when to be quiet, that which is present in what you eat and how much to eat. That self care is crucial. And if nothing, this time has taught us how to prioritize because there is no other way. And the value of kindness. It's important to be kind to each other. And may SOMA reach many hearts. And may through you that lamp stay lit, that lamp of wisdom that has been passed on to me, may it stay lit through you. That is my prayer. That is my wish, that may it benefit many.
Thank you, Indu. Thanks for tuning in. As always, you can find the show notes at the letstalk.yoga website, and I'll see you next week. Until then, take care. Bye bye.